When you think about businesses that are selling through the roof, like Skims or Allbirds, sure, you think about a great product, a cool brand, and great marketing. But an often overlooked secret is actually the businesses behind the business, making selling and for shoppers buying simple. For millions of businesses, that business is Shopify. It's home of Shop Pay, the #1 checkout in the world. You can use it to boost conversions up to 50%, meaning way less carts going abandoned and way more sales going through to checkout. Upgrade your business and get the same checkout Allbirds uses. Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to upgrade your selling today. Shopify.com/income.
Hi everyone, I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening. Hi everyone, I'm Deb Flashenberg. I'm your host for Yoga Birth Babies. And today I have Paige Bellenbaum. She's the program director of the Motherhood Center here in New York City. And she's back with us. And I have a really important topic we are going to discuss. This is so important for postpartum doulas, for prenatal yoga teachers, baby and me yoga teachers, friends, family, lactation consultants, lactation counselors, anyone that is going to be working with the postpartum and perinatal and prenatal population. It is all about how to approach a person you suspect may be suffering from perinatal mood and anxiety disorder. What's appropriate to say? How do you approach them? What kind of help can you offer? So please enjoy this very important podcast. It was wonderful having another chance to talk with Paige. And before we jump into this again, just a reminder, if you're getting something out of this podcast and you want others to learn about the information you're listening to, please take a moment to go to iTunes or Stitcher and leave a rating and review. It helps others find this information because really it's about supporting and empowering other people. And again, if you have the means, I'm asking if you think about just the idea of possibly leaving a donation on our website, prenatalyogacenter.com. It helps keep the podcast going. All right, without further ado, let's talk to Paige.
Hilton brings you new ways to stay, with experiences that let you capture the glory days. Introducing the Graduate Hotels. Each inspired by local college towns, these stays are always original and never boring. Get in touch with traditions all across the country and enjoy a stay that's a class above the rest. Book at Graduate Hotels with Hilton Honors Points at Hilton.com. It's a win-win. Hilton, for the stay.
Hi, Paige. How are you?
I'm doing well, Deb. Thanks so much for having me on today.
I was trying to think, is this your third or fourth podcast with me, or maybe even more?
Something around there, but always so grateful to be back.
I'm so happy to talk to you. Like anytime I have a topic that I feel like I want a really good therapist or, someone like a licensed social worker that really works in the perinatal community, I'm like, oh, Paige, let's see what Paige is up to. So I'm really excited to speak with you. Okay. So this conversation, and we had some banter about it before we pressed record. I'm titling it When Motherhood Doesn't Come Naturally. So I just want to throw that out there. We're going to talk a little bit more about what does that even mean? Because I'm kind of putting the naturally in quotes. But before we dig into that, I'd love for you to introduce, or maybe even reintroduce, because some people might have heard your past podcast, just reintroduce yourself and just share what led you to focusing on the perinatal community.
Well, thank you for this question. It's actually one of my favorites because when I respond, it regrounds me and reminds me why I do what I do. I came to this work of providing support and treatment to new and expecting mothers and birthing people experiencing what we refer to as perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, or PMADs, because I myself suffered from very severe postpartum depression and anxiety after my first child was born. And even as a trained and licensed social worker, clinician who is educated on how to recognize mental health conditions in other people. When it happened to me, I had absolutely no idea what was going on. I just knew that I was drowning in an ocean, paddling as fast as I could to keep my head above water. And that's really all I could bear to do while trying to take care of a brand new baby boy. And it took me a long time to seek help, ask for help, get the treatment I needed to feel better. And when I did, I got so angry because I spoke to so many other women and birthing people out there that described a very similar experience to me, that had been struggling for years or months without any education about their condition or the support they needed and deserved to feel better. So I went off to write legislation, because that's just what people do in New York State. And
It's not
got
just a lot of people do, but I love that that's what you do.
And we got the first bill signed into law back in 2014 that requires education to be given to women and birthing people upon discharge from the hospital after birth on maternal mental health conditions, and strongly encouraged that OBGYNs and other medical providers screen for perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. And then I had the great honor of opening up the doors of where I currently am at, the Motherhood Center, with Dr. Catherine Berndorf, who's a reproductive psychiatrist, back in 2017. And we have been open and treating and supporting thousands of women and birthing people ever since that are experiencing maternal mental health conditions.
I love hearing your journey. And I just laugh that you're like, because we put legislation on. I'm like, that's not what we all do. But I'm, again, so thankful that's what you do, because I'm really appreciative that the frustration then gets put out to help all the others that are suffering. So thank you for the work you do. I'm really excited to chat with you again. So let's jump into this topic about what comes, quote unquote, naturally. Because one thing you and I spoke about is something I hear my students come back saying, particularly to breastfeeding. They'll say, like, I thought, it's something many bodies can naturally do. So I thought it'd be easier. And that is often said of motherhood too, or parenthood, that many of us think it would be easier or instinctual, and there can be challenges. And I know we're going to talk a lot about kind of expectations versus reality and comparison, but I just want to kind of offer you kind of that jumping off point.
I'm so thankful for this jumping off point, because I really think it is the crux of the motherhood journey. And for those of your listeners that haven't heard of the term matrescence before, which is actually a term that's meant to suggest the transformation into motherhood, sounds similar to adolescence for a reason. If you and your listeners can recall back to that very awkward time of changing from a child to an adult, and all of the physical changes and emotional changes that go on with that developmental milestone, the same thing applies to becoming a mother, right? And that's why we have this wonderful term matrescence. And one of the things that goes along with this transition is the version of what we think this transition will be like, and what this transition actually is like. And I think, historically, for years and years and years, there has been a very romanticized, glamorized version of motherhood that is put forth. We don't have to look much further beyond our phones to find that on our social media feeds. There's a lot of messaging and images out there that support this very perfected image and sense of what it is to become a mother. There's that perfect, happy, glowing pregnant person. There's that brand new mom who's holding her baby with the biggest smile on her face. These are all the kinds of images that we see, whether it's on social media or it's in movies or magazines or baby products all around us, and also reinforced by the people that we know, that motherhood is the most magical, beautiful, and amazing thing that we will ever do. And
Yeah,
for
no, I'm glad you're saying all this. Keep going. I'm sorry. I interrupt you. Please keep going.
No. And for so many people, that is the case. But for a lot of other people, it's not. And there's a spectrum, right? There are some people that struggle a little bit with the transition to motherhood. And there's some people that struggle a lot with the transition to motherhood. And when we get there and we are in the weeds, especially in the beginning of caring for this tiny little vulnerable infant, we know what it feels like. We're exhausted. We're overwhelmed. We maybe haven't taken a shower in a couple of days. We've forgotten to eat all day. We are crying sometimes. We're wondering, what have I done? Right? There's this other side of motherhood that we don't talk about enough. And so when it happens to us, we start to feel like maybe we're doing something wrong. Everybody else that I know, everywhere I look, people have this whole motherhood thing nailed. It's so natural for them, right? It looks as though it's instinctual for other people. What's wrong with me?
Mm-hmm.
And so when we think about motherhood, and a lot of the work that I do at the Motherhood Center is really promoting this concept of the both and, or the dialectic. And that means two things can be true at the same time. So I can look at my baby and think he or she is the cutest thing I've ever seen, and in the very same breath I can feel like, oh my gosh, what have I done? I miss my old self. I wish I had my old life back. Both of these things can be true. One does not annihilate the other, nor does one or the other make us a bad mother. It makes us a person who's going through a huge transition.
Yeah, I love that you were saying that. I remember talking to my own mom about the expectations versus reality because she was pregnant, and this is so common, I think, with a friend, like around the same time. And it was actually someone we call aunt, but it's family friends that are not really aunts. And so Auntie Barbara had a very quiet, still quiet child, 53 at this point, but a quiet person. And my mother had my brother who was colicky and she couldn't understand. She kept thinking she was doing something wrong. And it just led to a lot of guilt and shame that she felt this way. And I don't think that's so unnatural. So what are some suggestions, like from, or uncommon, I guess should be the word, uncommon, if your friend looks like it's having so easily and you aren't. So what are some of your suggestions when that shift to motherhood leads to feeling guilt and shame?
Well, I want to answer that, but first I want to say, no two babies are the same. I often reference every baby is like a snowflake, right? For those of your listeners who maybe have two, you know that your own children could be not more polar opposite if they tried. And so it's impossible for us to compare our baby to someone else's baby because they're never going to line up. I remember the first interaction I had with an infant in my adult years when I was pregnant was one of my best friends. I watched her baby while she went skiing. This baby I held and played with for like an hour, was so happy. I laid the baby down, gave the baby the bottle, drank the bottle, fell asleep, and lay there for 3 hours for a nap. I was like, this is so easy. Oh my gosh. I can totally do this. Did either of my children ever operate in the world that way? Absolutely not. Not even close to that whole process I laid out of my friend's child. So it's important to know that we cannot compare our babies to other babies as well because they're all different.
Right.
But to your point, what ends up happening is we do compare. We compare our babies to other people's babies. We compare ourselves to other mothers. And more often than not, we find ourselves falling short, right? That another baby is doing something better or differently, or that we as a mother are not doing a good enough job. We're not doing things the way that we should be doing them or that we're supposed to be doing them. And comparison can be so complicated because it can cause us to feel guilty, ashamed, feeling judged by others because we're not doing it the right way. And that is such an uncomfortable and distressing experience to hold while we are transforming into a mother and expecting that this is going to be a much easier process along the way. Now, one thing I always encourage brand new moms and birthing people to know and understand, and if I can give them this information while they're still pregnant, it's the ideal time, is that it is totally okay for you to grieve the loss of who you were before you became a mother and to mourn that person, right? Who you and I both know will come back again slowly but surely. But I think there can be a lot of grief in that transformation. And with that grief can also welcome some guilt and shame about not liking this more, right? We have this expectation that when we meet our baby for the first time and they put the baby on our chest, that the skies are going to part and the angels are going to come down and it's going to be this magical moment of unconditional love and bonding. And this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. And oh my goodness, this is why I was put on this planet to have this baby. And again, for some people, that is their experience. But for a whole lot of other people, it's not their experience. And sometimes it can take weeks, if not months, to feel connected and bonded with our baby. And with that can be a lot of guilt and shame, right? So you start to see there are so many opportunities for a new mother or for mothers in general across the lifespan of motherhood to feel as though we're not good enough, right? That everybody else or many other people are doing it better. So that guilt and shame is real, and it can be so hard to navigate. One of the things I always encourage mothers of every stage of their motherhood journey is to really embrace the concept of good enough. Now, years and years ago, there was a famous psychoanalyst by the name of Winnicott who coined the term good enough mother. So, what Winnicott said, and what is still firmly believed today, is that when we fail our babies and our children in manageable ways, we are actually doing them a service because we are preparing them for the real world that's outside. When we give our babies and children opportunities to tolerate or learn how to tolerate the distress of not getting everything exactly when we want it, or we expose them to actual human feelings, right? This includes crying or perhaps getting angry. When we introduce them to real life, right? Being good enough, then we prepare them for real life. And so, being able to make room for ourselves, give ourselves permission to be good enough can help to minimize some of that guilt and shame. Because when we aim for perfection, first of all, you and I know there is no such thing as it. It doesn't exist. And so aiming for good enough, I always say to new moms, if you're good enough, you're nailing it.
Oh, I really like that. In fact, you've shared that with me in the past, and that is years now still holding true. And I still remind myself at times, because I have that. My son's 13, my daughter's almost 11, and there's moments I'm like, I'm really a bad mom. And then I'm like, no, Deb, the fact that you're even thinking about how to really be there for your kids means that you are putting effort in and you are good and good enough. So
Yep.
thank you for bringing that up. I want to dip more into the comparison because, like you talked about, it's in your phone, social media, and it can be really unhealthy. And what are some ways to try to stop that spiral? Because it's not just looking at the picture and be like, oh, they look cuter than I do today. It feels like it can really pull somebody down. So, what are some ways to help stop that spiral? Because it's not just between the social media, it could even be between friends, like new parent friends.
It's so hard. It's so hard not to, right? I think just by design as humans, and I will go so far as to say, particularly women, we do a lot of
Yeah.
comparing to our peers, to our friends, to our family members, to our colleagues. And that certainly becomes even more activated in motherhood. It's so easy to look around and see that person walking down the street who's holding the baby and talking on the phone and holding a coffee and seems to have it all together, and look at them longingly and think, wow, she really knows what she's doing. She's mastered this whole motherhood thing. Well, here I sit. My baby just threw up on my shirt. I'm trying to get home. The baby's screaming and crying. I wasn't able to even go get myself a coffee because there was a big accident all over my outfit, right? It's so easy to look at others and assume that they have it all together. Now, one of the things that I have learned in the work that I've done for almost 20 years now, working with new and expecting mothers and birthing people that are experiencing maternal mental health conditions, is that you cannot judge a book by its cover. Some of the most acute patients that have come to the Motherhood Center and sat in our waiting area that look impeccable. And we think to ourselves, is she a movie star? Is she a reporter? That can be our most ill patient with the most acute and severe symptoms of a perinatal mood and anxiety disorder. Motherhood is so elusive in that way because we feel so much pressure to look a certain way, act a certain way. And we feel like that's the right way. And if we don't show up like that, then we might be judged or people might think we're doing a terrible job. So I'll go so far as to say there can be a lot of pretending going on. I
Smart.
remember attending so many new moms groups before I actually got support and treatment for my postpartum depression, and how those conversations really were talking about the baby's bowel movements, how many naps they were taking, what were your favorite diapers or formula brands. Now, granted, this was a long time ago, but nobody was talking about, oh my gosh, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. Is anybody else crying during the day? Is anybody else unable to sleep because you're worrying so much about how the baby's doing? There was none of that conversation. I think things are starting to shift more and more where the pendulum has landed a little bit more in the middle, where we're starting to make room for the real parts of motherhood.
Yeah.
But when we're not talking about these things and we're showing up in a way that looks quote unquote perfect, then it's impossible not to compare ourselves. And I just want to leave you with one story that I think often resonates to people to drive this point home. When I was at my very worst with my son after he was born, and I had not been out of the house in days, if not a week or so, I maybe had taken a shower a few days before. I was wearing the same outfit every day that week. I was in such a depressed state, but I felt like I had to get out of the house. It was summer. I put my son in a sling. I walked to the park, which was a huge mistake because the minute I got there, I saw all of these new moms and moms of toddlers pushing their babies in the swings, down on their hands and knees, catching them on the slide. And I was like, oh, and I did exactly that. I compared myself to every single mother in that entire park who was smiling, laughing, having a good time. And I was like, this is the last place I should be. I am a terrible mother in a sea of everybody else who's doing it right. I went and sat down on a park bench and stared into space, and out of the corner of my eye, this beautiful mom started walking towards me. She was like a size 2 and she looked cute and her hair was done. She had lipstick on. She had this baby and a baby Bjorn. She's getting closer to the bench I was sitting on. And I'm thinking, oh my God, please don't sit next to me. Please do not. I have nothing in common with you. And sure enough, she came and sat down. She had a smile on her face. She took her baby out. She looked at her baby. Her baby smiled at her. She smiled at the baby. She looked over at me and she saw I was a frumpy woman with hair in knots with this little baby in a sling and said, isn't this the greatest thing that ever happened to you? And I looked at her and I said, no, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. And sometimes I wish I never did it. And her smile started to fade and the tears started to roll down her face. And she said, thank you so much for saying that. I feel the same way.
Oh,
And I think that just illustrates, right? You cannot tell what someone is going through by simply looking at them.
and I love that. I want to kind of bring it back to that whole matrescence adolescence, because if we can think back, so I am so in the thick of it. I have a 13-year-old son and my daughter will be 11 in like 2 days. So I'm like right in that tween, and it is bumpy and awkward and just kind of ugly at times.
Totally.
And if we can remember, for those that aren't in the middle of it with kids, if we can remember that bumpy, awkward transition and the hormones, which is a lot like we're talking about matrescence, like the hormones, and it's bumpy and awkward and ugly. And maybe then kind of giving ourselves a little of that grace and recognizing that it's not like caterpillar to butterfly. It's bumpy and awkward. So thank you for bringing up the matrescence and thank you for sharing that story. I think a lot of people can relate to that.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, let's see how starting to identify our strengths and values can help us see our own unique experience as parents. I think that might be something worthy to jump into. We'll be right back.
It's almost Mother's Day, and you can now get anything you need delivered with Uber Eats. Well, almost anything. So no, you can't order a relaxing shower, but some beautiful flowers, you bet we deliver those. A bird bath? No. A bath bomb? Absolutely. It's no to a chocolate lab, but yes to some chocolate truffles. So whether it's a last-minute gift for Mother's Day, fresh groceries, or food from your favorite restaurants, get it delivered today with Uber Eats. Order now. Product availability varies by region. See app for details.
The new McCrispy Strip is here. Dip approved by ketchup, tangy barbecue, honey mustard, Sprite, McFlurry, Big Mac sauce, double dipped in buffalo and ranch, more ranch, and creamy chili McCrispy Strip Dip. Now at McDonald's. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
Okay, so we are back. Now, as I was getting ready for this interview, I was trying to think about my own motherhood experience and my own strengths and definitely some weaknesses. Like one thing I'm really bad at, it is cards and gifts and some typical things that I know a lot of my kind of mom friends out there do. And I always feel badly there are certain strengths I have and those are not it. I mean, there's many others that I don't have, many weaknesses. But then I start to think about some of my own strengths and values. And I'm all about kind of just having fun and being free. And there's a lot of dancing and singing in the kitchen and in the car. And I love that my kids now do that too. And so I was trying to identify my own strengths and values, which makes me feel like that is what I can offer my kids as their mom. So how can we help people start to identify their own strengths and values to what they bring to their own unique experience?
I love this question, Deb, and I am so glad that you brought it up. And you started off by saying you have lots of friends that are good with cards and gifts, and perhaps that's not one of your strengths,
So
but
not.
you're able to identify some strengths and gifts, I will use the word, that you're able to bring to your family and give to your children, right? Now, earlier I made this comment about babies being like snowflakes. And I think it's really important that mothers understand mothers are like snowflakes too. No two are the same. And as we develop through our role of motherhood, right, we're going to find out that we do things very differently than other mothers around us. Not only that, but we will also probably learn that we have very different skills and styles than our own mother or parents, right? It is an individualized journey, and we all figure out how to do it on our own in our own way. So I think, first of all, recognizing that there's a lot of different ways to mother and mother well, and identifying those strengths, like you mentioned, right? You have the ability to create a space that's free and enjoyable and fun and liberating, I'll say, with your kids. You have shown them and given them permission that it's okay to dance around the house, act silly, let themselves look free and even awkward if they need to. That's something that's acceptable. And that is such a strength. And we're all going to be able to deliver these strengths. Sometimes we're not even recognizing it when we do, that other mothers and parents might not be able to. You know, one of the strengths that I liken myself to, although my kids would never agree with you, because sometimes when I'm talking to them, they'll be like, okay, can you just take off the therapist hat and just be my mom for a second now? And I'm like, oh, touche. But one of the gifts that I have given them, even though they sometimes tell me I'm acting like a therapist, is to have their feelings and to always validate their feelings, right? This is something that I didn't really experience growing up, right? We didn't really talk about feelings that were uncomfortable. And so one of the things I strive to do as a parent with my own children is make sure that they understand that all feelings are okay, even the hardest ones, and that I can hold space for your feelings. You can be mad at me and I can hold space for that. You can cry with me and I can let you do that and be there with you and not try to fix it or feel uncomfortable with your sadness, right? That's a gift that I have. Am I good at giving gifts or sending people thank you notes? Never done it in my life, despite my mother being the opposite of that. Am I good at making healthy meals for my children? Suck at it. My husband is the one who makes most of the meals in this house. I know how to make hamburgers and like noodles and meat sauce. That's it. So we all bring our own individualized strengths to our families and to our children. And I think being able to recognize that in yourself is so important. But I understand that it can be hard if we're comparing. So, what I always like to encourage new expecting moms to do is like bring it in, right? Bring it inward. Get in touch with yourself, right? Give yourself that grace and recognize what are some of the things that you like about yourself. What are some of the gifts that you are giving your children, even if they look completely different to the people around you? And there are many, many, if we give ourselves permission and the opportunity to find them.
Oh, I really love that. Finding and really thinking about one's strengths and values. I love, love, love that. So, what are some suggestions to start to build confidence in one's ability to parent and mother? Because, gosh, I'm sure you might still remember this. Your baby's handed to you, and they're like, "Okay, now go." Like, it's like, start this thing. And I just felt so scared and a lack of confidence. Like I felt confident. I'm like, I could change a diaper. I'm sure I can do that. I can put a onesie on. But the confidence of really stepping into that role, it took a bit. So do you have some suggestions of how to start to build that confidence to really step into that role of parent?
Another great question, Deb, because I think so many new mothers can relate to this experience of, I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like I have no sense of mastery. I think, particularly for women and birthing people that perhaps find themselves in the type A category, of which I always announce myself the president of, you know, there are many people who thrive in a very structured and organized environment where being in control gives them a sense of calm, and allows them that sense of fulfillment and mastery and confidence. I'm good at what I do. Oftentimes, this manifests on a professional level, or it manifests in the way that I keep my house very, very neat and tidy, and everything is in its place. As you referenced, when you have a baby, all of that gets turned upside down. Our sense of mastery, our sense of fulfillment, our sense of control, it is anything but. And for people that fall into this type A category, it's like having the rug ripped out from under you. I have control of nothing. I don't feel like I'm doing anything right. I am living in a state of disarray because I feel like I am at the mercy of this little person who's on no kind of a schedule. And I'm just reactive. And what this can bring is a lack of confidence. I don't know what I'm doing. I come from a place of being very confident in what I was doing, now to this brand new role of motherhood, and I don't know up from down. And that's a really jarring transition. And it happens very quickly because, as you know, you go from 1 minute I'm pregnant and I have a sense of control. Most things in my life haven't changed that drastically, to having a baby and everything's turned upside down. So one of the things that I always encourage, and I know this can be hard, and it's interesting. I do a lot of work with the partners and the dads of women and birthing people that are in treatment with us, that are kind of like, I don't know if I should have my partner do that. You know, they're very afraid of doing that thing. And so I've coined this term, the fear of firsts. Now, we all have felt fear of doing something for the first time before. It's like starting a new job, right? How many of us have imposter syndrome? When we start a new job, we walk in there on the first day and we're like, oh my God, what am I doing? They made a mistake by hiring me. I have no idea what I'm doing here. I don't know. This was a mistake. And we can feel super insecure about our ability to perform this job. And it can take a few weeks to a few months to really grow into a security level and a confidence level that we know what we're doing. There's an enormous learning curve. And the same thing goes for becoming a parent. It's a brand new role that we have never done before. And there's absolutely no way that we would know what to do because we haven't done it before.
Yeah.
So, fear of firsts, what do? We have to do the thing we fear the most. And that is the hardest thing ever, right? mothers who are very, very scared to give their baby a bath, so understandably. What is the best thing for them to do to gain a sense of confidence and mastery over giving their baby a bath? They have to give their baby a bath. And the more and more they practice the thing that causes them the most distress, the less distress it will cause them because they learn how to do it with practice. And so doing those things that we fear the most, by doing them and doing them again and again, we start to realize they're not as scary as we first thought. We actually can do the thing. We might not be able to do it exactly the same way every time, but we have more of a sense of confidence in doing it. And also, motherhood is so connected to permission. I use the word permission all the time. And the thing about our development into motherhood is that there's usually not anybody around us who's going to come over and tap us on the shoulder and say, hey, you know what? It's okay that you did it that way. Just give yourself a break, right? It might not have worked out the way that you wanted to this time, but there's always next time, right? We don't have that little helper that follows us around and says those helpful things into our ear. We have to become that person for ourselves. And that's where permission comes into play, right? I did this thing today. I don't feel great about it. I tried to put the diaper on. I tried to get the baby all bundled up to go outside. We were out with friends. The baby had a massive blowout. It was so embarrassing. It got all over everything. I had to go home. I'm feeling really embarrassed and ashamed, right? Giving myself permission. I was in a situation that I ultimately had no control over. It was messy. It wasn't ideal. And I did the best I could considering the circumstances. That's giving yourself permission to not be perfect. And so it's one of my magical words. And I think, on top of making ourselves try to do the things that cause us the most distress and giving ourselves permission if they don't work out exactly the way that we think they should or they're supposed to, can be a really good formula for feeling more comfortable in our own skin.
Oh, that is such good information. Oh, you're so good at this, which is why I love speaking to you. All right. So this one's going to be right. This next question's totally up your alley. What are some signs that someone needs to reach out for help?
Really good question. What this boils down to is kind of what I started with in my area of expertise, which is working with women and birthing people that are experiencing maternal mental health conditions. Now, everyone has heard of the term postpartum depression, the baby blues. We might not really know the difference between these two, but what's important to note is that perinatal mood and anxiety disorders, or PMADs, include a lot of different conditions beyond just depression during pregnancy or the postpartum period. So it includes depression, anxiety, obsessive compulsive disorder, post traumatic stress disorder, and in very rare but serious instances, psychosis. And really, to put a perspective on it and a number on it, statistics suggest that it's anywhere from 1 in 3 to 1 in 5 new and expecting mothers and birthing people that experience a PMAD. So these are very common conditions. Again, they're on a scale, right, of acuity. Many people experience mild symptoms, some moderate, some severe. But what I will always say to people who are wondering, how do I know if this is normal or if there's really something else going on? With the baby blues, 80% of all new mothers experience the baby blues. It is due to a rapid shift in hormones. So estrogen and progesterone levels are dropping more significantly than any other time in a woman's life. That, on top of sleep deprivation and just the general overwhelm of bringing a baby home, can cause many people to cry throughout the day, feel super overwhelmed, feel anxious, feel aggravated and irritated. Super common. Almost everybody feels that way, and those symptoms last up to 2 weeks. As clinicians, we take a look at and take into consideration if those symptoms prevail, beyond the 2-week mark or become more intense, then we start to think maybe something else is going on, right? If someone is feeling helpless or hopeless, right, that is never normal. If somebody is crying so frequently, doesn't want to get out of bed, feels absolutely no connection to the baby whatsoever, feels like they made a huge mistake, feels like they want to escape or they don't want to live anymore, is so anxious that they're not able to sleep at night, even when the baby's sleeping or being cared for, or has no appetite and has really lost a lot of weight in the postpartum period quite rapidly. These are some of the signs and symptoms that we look out for. And again, it's based on intensity and frequency. So when these symptoms are happening a lot of the time or most of the time, and they are getting in the way of somebody's ability to complete daily tasks and care for themselves and or their baby, that's when we start to think that maybe a perinatal mood and anxiety disorder is at play. Now, what I always tell women, and is so important for all of your listeners to hear, is that if you experience depression or anxiety or any one of these conditions during pregnancy and the postpartum period, you have not done anything wrong. There is nothing wrong with you, right? And that these conditions are 100% treatable, right? Whether it's mild, moderate, or severe, we know what works. And with the right support and treatment when someone's struggling, the sooner they can get back to having the experience of motherhood that they always wanted to have. So they're super common conditions. They're super treatable. And the sooner you ask for help and get the help you need and deserve, the sooner you can feel like yourself again.
Thank you so much for sharing that and in such a relatable way. I really, really appreciate that. We're going to take one more break. When we come back, what is one final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents? Okay, we'll be right back.
Vitamin Water was born in New York because New Yorkers wanted more flavor to pair with all the amazing food in the city. You can have the best meal in the world here, if you can get a reservation. Vitamin Water is so New York, its 3 favorite cheeses are chopped cheese, bacon, egg, and cheese, and a slice of cheese pizza. We know where to get the best sushi in the city, and best nachos, and best bagels, and best... You get it. And you can find food trucks better than 5-star restaurants. Drink Vitamin Water. It's from New York.
We are back. So I'm always curious if you're going to share this from a place of being a mother or from your professional place as a perinatal specialist. So what is one final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents?
Oh, it's hard. This is where my therapist hat and my actual mom hat mix together. And in a lot of ways, I think it's impossible for those two things not to come together since I do specialize in perinatal mental health. But I mean, interestingly enough, Deb, you mentioned this earlier, giving yourself grace, and not holding yourself accountable to meet some unobtainable goal or unrealistic level of motherhood, right? That we might find ourselves comparing ourselves to, often in others, but also in that kind of quintessential fantasy of what perfect mothers look like. Giving ourselves grace to make mistakes, giving ourselves grace to not be perfect, giving ourselves grace to walk away when things feel super overwhelming, giving ourselves grace to care for ourselves. And I know that when we think about self-care, right, I tend to think of like going and getting a pedicure or a haircut. And we know that in motherhood, that's not necessarily self-care. We're all about self-preservation and surviving. But in those moments, particularly in the beginning of like survival, those first 3 months after having a baby, what does it mean to take care of yourself? It means to allow yourself to take a 5-minute shower, right? And have somebody else care for the baby. It means allowing yourself in those moments where you feel so frustrated and so angry that the baby's been crying for 3 hours straight. And no matter what you try to do or how you try to do it, it doesn't work. That you are going to give yourself the grace to go into the bathroom, close the door, splash cold water on your face, scream into a towel, take some deep breaths, and then go back out again, right? Giving ourselves grace and permission to prioritize ourselves a lot of the time, because as the old saying goes, when you're on an airplane and they tell you to put your oxygen mask on before anybody else's, they say that for a reason. When our glass is even a quarter full, we are in a much better position to care for the people around us than if we are flying on empty. So I know that's a lot, but I think giving ourselves grace in all of these ways and permission to not be perfect, it's hard to exercise, but like sometimes what we need to do is write it on a sticky, right? I give myself permission to not be perfect, or come up with a mantra. I am good enough. I'm doing the best job I can. My baby is lucky to have me. I am a good mom. Those stickers on the refrigerator, put them on the bedstand, put them on your phone. Remind yourself of these things because they are true. These are some of the ways that we can care for ourselves as we make one of the largest transitions of our life.
Yeah, I tell the students that come in for postnatal yoga, I'm hoping they're proud of themselves for putting themselves as a priority. They show up, and whether they get half the class in, all the class, like 5 minutes, they still saw that caring for themselves, showing up on the mat, thinking about how to mentally and physically just be present and breathe. That the fact that they even put that on their schedule, I think is huge. It really says a lot about self-preservation and not even preservation. It's helping yourself really show up to be the best you can and really grab the moment of being a parent and doing the best they can with that. And I'm not sure if I'm saying best you can in a good way, because I don't want them to feel like, okay, I'm going to start that over. Right? We're going to pause that. So I love what you were saying about kind of the cup half full. Because I know that when my students show up for postnatal, I know often they're exhausted, but I often say, I hope that they're proud of themselves for recognizing the need to take care of themselves. Because as you're saying, if you're completely empty, there's nothing to go on. And so just by showing up on the mat, they're giving back to themselves. So Thank you for sharing that. Where can people find your work?
Well, I would strongly encourage anybody who's listening now that feels as though perhaps they're struggling with a perinatal mood and anxiety disorder, or if they know someone is struggling, you can check us out at the Motherhood Center. We're at www.themotherhoodcenter, all one word.com. And you can learn a little bit more about all of our services that range from support groups to seeing a therapist or a reproductive psychiatrist, all the way to our very special day program for new and expecting moms that are having a really hard time taking care of themselves and the baby. These are all programs that are accessible to your listener. We have care coordinators that are at the ready to take your call and answer any questions you might have and give you a brief screen to better understand exactly what you're going through. But we exist to provide that support and treatment to birthing people that are struggling with their mental health. And yeah, if you need us, we're here. And again, I just want to remind everybody that with the right help and support, everyone can feel like themselves again.
Thank you so much. I'll make sure that the Motherhood Center and everything about it is on our website and in the show notes. Paige, yet again, I'm always thrilled to have a conversation with you. You bring so much compassion and grounded knowledge. So thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity, Deb. It's always a pleasure to speak with you.
This has been an episode of Yoga Birth Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Thanks for listening.